Andre Drummond is one of the most athletically gifted basketball players in the NBA and world. Standing at 6'11", he has always been quite agile and exceptionally strong for his size. This allows him to be an absolute beast on the offensive and defensive glass, but many predicted his growth as a player to be exponential, and thought he had the potential to one day be the best center in the NBA. But weight issues, asthma issues, and horrendous free throw shooting have limited him as a player, and he's failed to add anything to his game for a few seasons. But in the first 10 games of this season, he has seemingly gone back to his old self, dominating the glass, scoring well, defending a lot better, and his free throw problems appear to be solved. This video will cover his history as a player, from college to the draft, to his incredibly promising first few seasons, and then consider what caused the temporary decline, before discussing his apparent resurgence to begin this season and whether or not it is sustainable. Drummond has always had an absolute wealth of talent and has dominated every level of basketball he has been involved with along the way. Andre was born in New York before moving to Connecticut, where he would play both his high school and collegiate basketball. Drummond was one of the most dominant high school players of his era and was ranked as the #1 player in the class of 2011 nationally by both ESPN and NBADraft.net, two of the biggest rankings in the country. Following his high school career, Drummond announced that he would attend the University of Connecticut for what many assumed would be a one-and-done college career. Many were shocked that he chose UConn over college powerhouses such as Kentucky, Louisville, or Georgetown, but Drummond obviously wanted to stay as close to home before he departed for the NBA. Drummond would average 28.4 minutes a game in college and record 10 points and 7.6 rebounds a game to go along with his 2.7 blocks. And whilst this wasn't the dominance that many expected the athletically superior Drummond to display in college, he still showed signs that he had the tools to be a fantastic big man in the NBA for many, many years. But after being knocked out in the first round of the NCAA tournament, Drummond did what everyone expected and declared for the NBA draft. Despite ESPN once writing that Andre Drummond would have the chance to go #1 in any draft that he entered, Drummond slipped all the way to #9 in one of the weaker drafts in NBA history. The 2012 draft had top talent in Anthony Davis, Dame Lillard, Bradley Beal, Harrison Barnes, Draymond Green, and Drummond himself, but many players that were taken this high were now perceived as reaches or even busts, such as Thomas Robinson, Terrence Ross, and Dion Waiters, who were all taken over the mammoth of a big man, Andre Drummond. Drummond was eventually taken by the Detroit Pistons, where he spent the entirety of his NBA career so far. With Greg Monroe on the roster in his rookie year, Drummond would start only 10 of his 60 games and work his way to finishing 4th in Rookie of the Year voting and onto the All-Rookie second team. Drummond showed flashes of brilliance in his rookie season, as an athletic and quick big man who was impossible to keep off of the glass. He had one moment in his rookie season which I'll remember forever, when he stripped Dwayne Wade of the ball in 2 possessions in a row, out on the perimeter. And this wasn't old and washed up Dwayne Wade. This was 2013, when Wade was still an absolute force and one of the best players in the NBA. These flashes of brilliance had Pistons fans dreaming of a center who was a force down low, but had the quickness to guard switches and the pick and roll effectively. Essentially the perfect NBA big man. In his second season, Drummond would really show this potential in full effect, starting in every single game of his 81 games, scoring 13.5 points a game, and grabbing a massive 13.2 rebounds a game, all whilst having 1.2 steals and 1.6 blocks a game. Perhaps the most important part of this season was the efficiency with which Drummond was scoring, with a field goal percentage of 62.3%, the highest of his career. This was due to Drummond largely shooting only in pick and rolls when the defense collapsed off him or when he grabbed defensive rebounds. These are all shots which are incredibly conducive to scoring at an incredibly high clip and helped Drummond be one of the most efficient players in the NBA in only his second season. Drummond's third season saw him score relatively similar numbers, but he began to experiment in the post and scored at a far less efficient 51.4% from the field. Stan Van Gundy had asked Drummond to begin to develop his post game as he envisioned Drummond operating in a similar fashion to Dwight Howard in the late 2000s Orlando Magic teams, drawing double teams in the post and kicking it out to open three-point shooters to create incredibly efficient looks. There are 2 main reasons why I think this wasn't the greatest of successes. First of all, Drummond's horrific free throw shooting may have led to him being less aggressive in the post and settle for hooks and jumpers, as he did not want to draw contact and head to the free throw line. On top of this, when you have a guy who is an absolute force in the spread pick and roll offense, why would you want to anchor him in the post, limit ball movement, and ultimately give the defense a much easier look to cover? Players' egos have cost themselves in their teams in the past, and many wonder how effective Dwight Howard could have been in Houston if he resigned himself to this role a little earlier and didn't demand the ball in the post as much. Despite continuing to experiment in the post, Drummond would go on to have his best season in his 4th year in the NBA, averaging 16.2 points, 14.8 rebounds, and 1.5 steals and 1.5 blocks per game. He'll be named to an All-Star, to the All-NBA 3rd team, and would lead his team to the playoffs for the first time since 2009. And even though they were swept by the Cavaliers, the Pistons fought valiantly in each of the 4 games, and many predicted Detroit to be a top 4 or 5 seed in the East the next season, with an incredibly bright future going forward as well. Due to this immense promise and his great record overall so far, the Pistons would sign Drummond to a 5-year, $130 million contract. But again, Drummond and the Pistons would regress and disappoint their front office and their fans. Everyone was baffled by their play, and big questions were asked about Andre and the team. Many journalists and fans believed that Drummond had gotten lightly out of shape during the offseason after he locked himself into so much money. And it is a common occurrence for NBA players to sign big deals that set them up for life and then never play up to the same standard again. Now, Drummond didn't drop off the face of the earth, but he did look slower, more sluggish on defense, and wasn't scoring as effectively as before. The Pistons struggled a result and failed to make the playoffs, and many expected them to repeat the poor year again this season. But reports began to circulate that Drummond had lost weight, and in a Drew League game he looked notably leaner and quicker. But it was just a Drew League game, and most didn't pay it much attention. That is until a report came out in May that said Drummond had had surgery on his nose as one of his nasals had been blocked. This had severely limited his aerobic capacity, and after the corrective surgery, he looked set to be able to run out games better and put more effort on the court, due to the fact that he could breathe a lot easier and circulate oxygen more effectively through his body. And this is translating to the eye test as well, with Drummond looking a lot more fluid and fit on the court and getting back to his normal pick and roll game. The increase in fitness and speed has allowed him to be far more fluid and productive on the defensive end, disrupting more lanes and contesting shots better at the rim. His second jump has also noticeably improved and is allowing him to contest a shot before bouncing back up to grab the rebound. The other thing that is much improved is his free throw shooting. Drummond has been dipping his knees a lot more and has been following through fluidly with his shot. He's shooting 75% for the season from the free throw line compared to his career averages of around 40%. And this allows him to be kept on the court in crunch time situations and prevents teams from resorting to hacker Drummond strategies against him. It is yet to be seen if this shooting streak is sustainable, but the change in shot motion and early trend is an extremely good sign for Pistons fans and fans of the big man in general. Plus, he had a game where he hit 14 out of 16 of his free throws against the Bucks. Another great sign, as it isn't just Drummond fluking 1 or 2 free throws a game. It will also allow Drummond to continue to explore his post-game more, as he won't be afraid of being fouled and heading to the line. Because of this lack of fear, he can attempt to try and back defenders down more forcefully and simply overpower them with his insane athleticism. Although I have to say, I am still mainly a fan of Drummond getting involved in the pick and roll and collapsing defenses, as I believe it gets him the best looks at the basket and collapses the defense the most to create open shots for his teammates. The Pistons are rolling this season and are 7-3 in their first 10 games out of the gates, following great play from Drummond, Tobias Harris, Avery Bradley, Stanley Johnson and Reggie Jackson. It will be interesting to see if this play is sustainable, and if Drummond's increased effort and free throw shooting will continue over the entirety of a season. If it does, the Pistons will be a force in the same style that the Dwight Howard Magic were, and could pose some serious problems for teams in the playoffs. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more NBA videos in the future. And let me know what you think of Drummond and the Pistons in the comments below.